one of the things that people don't realize as they go through the process of adoption or before they start is that in most countries, you're going to have to do post-adoption reports, which are typically visits with your social worker, and your social worker writes up a report and sends it to the country to basically, it's basically nothing can really happen to your adoption if you don't do it. If you get a bad report, China's not going to come back and take your child or anything like that. But it's more of a diplomatic thing that we're trying to help the country understand that these children how these children are doing, that they're doing well, that they're being taken care of, and things like that. And so every country, if they do have them required, has their own kind of schedule. China's quite a few for quite a few years. Haiti, we're still trying to figure out exactly what Haiti wants.
Well, they just changed it, so it's quite a few, but
yeah. And so what has, I mean, you've had one so far, you've had a couple. What is that process like of doing the post-adoption report?
More paperwork. No, it wasn't that big of a deal. We just had one so far, and we just had to send pictures and just some paperwork, and then the social worker came and just made sure everything was going well. I think there's a reference letter from a neighbor too, just some kind of random things.
I remember at the time also, if we weren't having any issues, but resources were, again, you were reminded of resources if you're struggling in certain areas, or if you feel like you need more support, or the social worker also can give you some resources on help or support if you're having different issues.
That's the good thing about it is it's like this requirement that you have to do, and that's kind of frustrating and stuff, especially if things are going well. But it's just good to touch base with somebody that wants to help you every once in a while and be able to say, maybe even remind you, here's a couple of things you should be looking for that may not be big deals, but you may want to pay attention to, or something that they may notice while they're sitting there with you. It's just a good time to touch base and remember that this is serious what you did, and you may need some resources. You may need some help. You may need to think a little bit harder about how things are going. You may need to think about that one or two things that happened that you weren't quite sure if that's just kind of a normal thing or if it's a kind of an adoption related thing.
well, a lot of families don't realize that it's the way that we stay licensed in the countries, because those reports go back to the country and they can see that the children are doing well in these homes, and it's the way that we stay licensed in that country. And, you know, it helps the governments in those countries to say, hey, these kids are doing okay, and they're thriving in those countries. And it's interesting because part of the report that's due for Haiti is if the child is older, they have to send a report card so that it shows that the children are going to school and that they're actually doing well in school. And that's one thing that the Haitian government really loves. So they can say, you know, if these children were here in Haiti, they wouldn't be going to school. But now they're in the US and they're going to school and they're actually doing well in school. So that's kind of, you know, that's part of the report that's really well. And that's, you know, they only have to do so many social worker reports, but then they have to do quite a few parent reports for several years later. And then those are sent back to the country. But like Ethiopia and Haiti and I think, well, it was Russia, but China, all of those countries, if we don't send the reports, then we can no longer work in those countries. So they're really important.
I think one of the things that some people don't recognize or whatever is that hopefully what this does is creates a relationship with your social worker that if in between reports you need to talk to somebody, you remember, oh, I've talked to this person about this, I can call them and get more resources. Get, you know, the post-adoption reports are, you know, something that have to be done, but you also have to remember that you may need other resources. And it's just a good way to remind you of that.
Well, and you
there
may
are
not
other
need
things that-
resources 6 months out, but maybe 12 months out, an issue pops up. And so it is nice to
Or
have
even 2
somebody
years
check
down
in.
the road.
Right.
Like, oh, I should call my social worker because, this is really weird, but like they're wetting the bed and they never did that before. And I wonder what
Or
that's
they're
about.
still wetting the bed and
Or
it
they're
hasn't
still wetting the
stopped,
bed.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you can call them and say, is that normal? Or so you have this relationship with them so that you can,
Right.
And your social worker may not be the like ultimate resource for that. Like I'm not an expert in enuresis, but I will help
But
you
you know
find
people.
somebody
Yeah.
that will be able to help you with that.
Right.
I don't even know that I'm an expert in a lot of things, but if you call me, I can say, well, I know that's normal, or I know that that's normal but abnormal. Does that make sense? Like, it's normal for these kids, but it's still something that needs to be worked on, and get you the resources you need, get you counseling if you need it. And I want to hear just as much as how the children's doing, I want to hear how you're doing, because I think a lot of parents forget that about themselves, that maybe they're the ones that need the counseling, maybe they're the ones that need support, and they may even realize that the child may not need to change or can't change some things, and the parent just needs to have some support to make some changes themselves in their understanding and how they cope with what's going on.
I know a lot of people who've come home recently and the kids are doing great and the parents are a little like postpartum kind of depression, and it's a big change. And the kids require sometimes a lot of effort to just get through the day, and to try and do it right, and it can be exhausting.
It really is. You can look at it as a requirement, or you can look at it as a support to even just to touch base to make sure that you're doing well.
Well, I called my social worker several times after, I brought my son home. And I'm in this field. I've been in this field for 11 years. I've said that several times, but, sometimes you're so close to it that, like, I've called my social worker several times and I'm like, my son's been doing this and this and this, and like, I noticed triggers, and I would call him and I'd be like, what do you think about this? And he'd be like, why don't you, and he recommended a couple books for me to read and stuff, and I loved that. I was like, oh, that's a good idea, or, oh, I did read that book, I'm going to look that up, or, so I felt like it was super supportive, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad I had him. And, when he came to do my, my reports, I was like, what do you think about this? Or, he's done this, or he's been throwing these little temper tantrums, and what do you think about that? And he gave me several ideas. So I loved it.
Well, I
was
think
like,
that's a good point. Even you're in the field, but sometimes it's so close to home, you can't step outside the box to look to know if that's an issue or normal, and it's nice to have that outside opinion.
I tend to overanalyze things, so it's good to get like a second opinion and be like, and even now, like, he was in the office the other day and I was like, he's always asked me, how's Rob doing? And I thought it's so great because he's done all my reports and did my home study and stuff. So every time I see him, he always asks me, how's he doing? And so I love that because we still have that great relationship because he did everything for me. So, I love that.